Right, so Keir Starmer being dead set on waging war against so-called keyboard warriors who are to blame for inciting riots in the UK won't just stand for people actually in the UK, but could apparently land people abroad in hot water too who've got in on the act. And of course Starmer's most public spat on such matters has very much been with somebody based abroad, a certain Elon Musk. Now, Musk has certainly been abusing his lofty position on this score, and as much as I've spoken about how Starmer might abuse such legislation to gag legitimate freedom of expression and freedom of speech to curtail such riot-inducing nonsense, that isn't to say there are not legitimate cases for prosecution in relation to actual comments made designed to incite riots, however, and in that regard Musk might have dropped himself in a spot of bother. And it does highlight the problems a lack of legislation to govern social media specifically could bring. Musk owns Twitter, as we know. He might call it X these days, but it'll always be the bird sight to most of us. And through that, he's pretty much above all of us in what he can get away with saying on that platform. It's his platform, and we have to play within his arena when we use it. However, by deleting the offensive and insightful tweet he recently put out, it begs the question of whether he is truly above the law, as it were. And could we actually see the guy extradited for his actions? Because that seems to be what's being talked up right now, isn't it? Right, so the riots up and down the UK have been incited, have been committed, and people have been arrested and charged with offences in relation to all of that. We've seen that progressing over the last few days, having crossed the line of freedom of expression. I suppose, given some of what we've witnessed, that seems like a bit of an understatement, but we're going to be talking in legislative terms here in this video. So we have protected freedom of expression in the UK, don't we? Which of course includes freedom of speech. It's a form of expression, but also extends to protesting and extends to various gestures we might choose to make. It's all in the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, and its human rights legislation. But this isn't an absolute protected right. They come, our human rights with regards to the ECHR, they come in various levels, as it were. Some are absolute, like the right to life, but others are not. Some of them, it comes with a sense of responsibility, as it were. It depends on the situation being referred to in that. It obviously doesn't extend to hate speech and incitement to riots, as is the case we're talking about here. Posts that might cause anxiety and fear, that stoke hatred. Such actions might also fall afoul of the Communications Act, which does cover social media platforms, but let's just say isn't perfect in that regard. So where do you draw the lines of distinction then? A litany of harassment or abusiveness versus an extended conversation which might get a little bit tetchy, turns into a bit of a thread. Is that enough to just be annoying, or does it have to be more than that in order to become a crime? The Communications Act itself not having been designed particularly to police freedom of expression, despite it ending up being used as such in cases that have concerned social media previously. Cases that have been successful, but equally cases that have been quashed too. Annoying isn't enough to be a crime. Inciting violence or hatred is wrong in law. There's provision for that under the Human Rights Act, under the ECHR. The law will then intervene. And we've seen examples of that exposed in these riots. The woman who spread a false name in relation to the Southport attack being arrested. Hotels being named for housing asylum seekers to incite others to target them in some way. Those doing that should face consequences for their actions too, for driving the hatred. But equally so should those who have encouraged such narratives to propagate. The Farages of this world, yes. The Douglas Murrays, the mainstream media, but also Starmer himself is not absolved having targeted people too. Bengalis, notably during the general election campaign as he tried to win right-wing votes. Ignoring Muslim organisations during these riots whilst running to pro-Israeli ones. And of course it does bring us to Elon Musk as well in what he said in regard to actions here versus the US law, which as a US citizen actually governs him. Musk put out a tweet which he later deleted, claiming that Keir Starmer was planning on building detainment camps for rioters on the Falklands Islands. Now, having grown up in apartheid South Africa as a white man, I'd imagine Musk knows more about such things than Starmer does. Musk has been goading Starmer for days, though, also saying the country is facing inevitable civil war. And in my view, the most offensive thing that Musk has said, every inch a racist himself, frankly, in saying this, when he said that Starmer's government wouldn't tolerate attacks on Muslims and mosques, and why isn't he concerned about all communities? Surely that is the language of incitement, isn't it? Or is it just being racist? Is it not quite enough? Never mind Musk has got it completely backwards with Starmer. He should read the Ford report to realise Starmer prioritises anti-Semitism over all other forms of racism, not Muslims. But it encourages more attacks on those same communities already under assault and living in fear. And given Musk owns this platform he's using to spread such filth, this is clearly an abuse of his position. So how can he be held to account? Does it not just encourage Starmer to be as authoritarian as he wants to be with social media, with Musk giving him an excuse? Certainly Met Police boss Mark Reilly has said as much about offences caused by so-called keyboard warriors as he put it, no matter where they were, that the police here in the UK would be coming for them in an interview with Sky News. Musk called him a craven two-tiered coward in response, clearly not bothered about the law coming for him, you would think, but is he too big to be above the law? And if Starmer chose to try to extradite him, or the CPS as it were, would it happen? Well, Musk deleting his tweet concerning these purported detainment camps amongst the penguins on the Falklands certainly did get deleted. But ultimately, and this is according to the Black Belt Barrister YouTube channel, who've done an excellent video covering this issue in far more detail, they got hold of a US barrister to explain the ins and outs. Musk probably won't be facing extradition to the UK over his actions, was the conclusion drawn by the US barrister. As entertaining as it might be to see it happen, and you can imagine the hoops Musk might leap through to avoid it, and certainly has the cash to fight it, it is probably off the table. That isn't to say that the UK wouldn't necessarily have a case to seek extradition. In theory, a case of extradition on the basis of incitement to commit lawless action is how this US barrister would conceivably see matters playing out, specifically in relation to Musk's civil war comment, as this charge would be. So he sees that comment as being criminal in that sense, I suppose, and sees this as how the CPS might choose to proceed, and certainly Starmer, with his background, albeit his competence in that also questionable, might argue this publicly if there at all seems any likelihood of pursuing such a course of action. However, the barrister also warns this wouldn't be successful, because in his view the words were not insightful. They were simply a warning of what will happen under Starmer given his handling of the rioting. It was criticism of Starmer, which at that point was pretty non-existent as it happened. Starmer was not handling the situation well. He was nowhere to be seen. Civil disobedience, I would contest, is going to become more likely should Starmer fail to make people feel meaningfully better off with continuity Toryism and austerity to come, and with such warnings of cuts coming in the soon-to-come autumn budget, I'm certainly minded that way myself. People are not going to be happy, and they're going to feel despair after 14 years of the Tories abusing the country and abusing them, making them feel all the worse off constantly. People voted Labour to feel better off, and if they don't end up feeling that way, they're going to end up feeling no different to how they felt under the Tories. The civil disobedience can't be ruled out. Musk's comment, as crass and unhelpful as it was regarding potential civil war, I read as an observation as well. The problem is all the anti-migrant rhetoric will have people continuing to target ethnic minorities, migrants and the such like as the ones at fault. But it's the Farages and the Starmers and the Generics and the Bravermans doing that far more than Elon Musk is. He's just a rich prat with too much time on his hands. The real damage is being done on these shores and by our politicians in no small way. If people continue to feel worse off, it'll be men in suits making us that way, just as they have been before. But telling us all it's the migrants who just turned up that morning on a beach in Kent somewhere who have made their lives hell for years just has to stop. That's not going to work anymore. We have to tell our politicians, no more. You're not going to scapegoat these people anymore when we know the problem is people like you instead. Where, according to our laws and our freedom of expression, Musk's words can be interpreted perhaps as incitement, no such provision exists in US law, so no extradition attempt on this basis would functionally work. So all in all, unless Musk drops himself in it further, more overtly, and his deletion of his latest stupid comment suggests somebody has suggested he tone things down, for how long who knows, but at the moment it would seem he's not really in any bother, so there's no need to get too excited about a high-profile extradition. There will be a lot of hard man posturing. That's going to carry on. There will no doubt be people hauled in for incitement, given their own words. Deservedly so, I'm sure. But as I've said on previous riot videos, that should include the politicians too who have played a part in this, and that includes Keir Starmer himself. He needs a long, hard look at his own mirror over his own words, his own conduct, the offence he has caused, and the possible contribution those words have made towards leading to the violence and attacks we're still bearing witness to right now. Starmer himself absolutely has to be held accountable for his own actions as much as anyone else. For as much as extradition seem all tough talk right now and make Starmer look good in the press, his own actions need holding to account, because nobody is above the law, and that means him too. And that is a message that must not be lost as we condemn those throwing bricks on the street as much as those inciting violence online as well. All of this is political, and politicians must be made to take responsibility for their acts and their narratives too. A novelty for Starmer, as I'm sure that would be, a man who takes no responsibility for anything ever going wrong. And I'm minded to think that anything Musk might have said about rioting here, well, he wasn't the one who said Israel had the right to starve the people of Gaza or turn the power off to them. Get more on political incitement here in the UK in this video recommendation here at the political level, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.